So about your exam, it's corrected, but I still have some detail to iron out. About last class, I put it online, and yeah. So let's continue where we were. So just as a reminder, so this is what we had done last time, and not yesterday, but last time. And yeah, so the thing that I didn't do is check my phone. So I realized that I talked way too long until like 3 minutes before the next class. So I think I should go back a bit and tell everybody what's going on. So yeah.
Sorry, sir. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't really understand what you said about the grades. Could you re-say it real quick?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
You didn't say anything about grades?
No, I just
But,
said that I'm ironing out, yeah, some issue with some corrector, some.
okay,
But
last time you said that we'll maybe get them soon. So is that soon, or what metric are we talking about?
yeah, last time I thought it would be like the day after, but then yes, I don't want to go into the detail but it's just yeah, it's soon.
Soon. Okay.
But see, the thing is, so when I have the official grades, then I send them to the secretary. So I don't know how long it takes her to process them, anyways.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just go back a tiny bit. So I think if I start here, it's not too bad. So this is the story we were telling. So there was one question here. Okay. Yeah. So there was another question about the grades. So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. I wish it. Yeah, it should have been finished a long time ago, but I'm had. It's just. Anyways, I don't want to talk about it. All right. So general equilibrium. So the story is the same story as we were telling before. So prices are taken as given by people, and the old generation give their money to the young generation. They have some amount of money that they just give to the next generation. So what is the total demand for money from the young generation? It's LTMT. And what is the total supply borrowing from the old generation is LT minus 1, MT minus 1. And in equilibrium, this has to be true. So LT minus 1, MT minus 1, the amount of bills that the old generation is ready to give to be able to consume is exactly the same as the amount of money or amount of M1, M2, any definition of money you may want, that the young generation is ready to receive in exchange for goods. So that's the equilibrium. It's a pretty easy one. And then we simply use this formula. So we had that, and then what we did is so use the fact that we know what the LT is if we know LT minus 1 because we know the growth rate of the population is 1 plus n. So we get that LT minus 1 equals LT minus 1, 1 plus n. So eventually LT minus 1 is going to cancel out. And then what we do is we substitute MT and MT minus 1 with our definitions here. So these were our demands as a function of what? Of the price level and the production and the fraction that is consumed in each period. So here it's beta divided by 1 plus beta for MT, and for MT minus 1 is PT minus 1, and then omega beta divided by 1 plus beta. So if you don't remember these formulas, yeah, here they are derived. and we just solved this problem. It's we're still in the interior solution, so that's the solution that makes sense. It's a solution for which the first order conditions allow us to find the interior solution. Okay. Yeah, and then so we find that this cancels out, and in the end we get a very simple solution. We get that, so we can just divide by 1 plus n on that side, for instance, and switch sides, and we get that 1 plus pi t minus 1 equals 1 over 1 plus n. So and then I can easily find that pi t minus 1 is actually negative if there is a growth rate of a positive growth rate of population. So it means there is deflation or there is negative inflations. So prices don't go up, they go down. So that's a very funny feature of this economy. And it is simply because since there is more and more people in the economy and everybody always produces the same amount, omega, then it means that over time there is more and more goods that are going to be exchanged, but the same amount of money to exchange them. So inflation is when the money supply increases too much compared to how much goods are needed to be exchanged in the economy and how fast people exchange them. And here there is zero change in the money supply, but there is an increase, there's still an increase in the growth of the economy. So it means that the inflation rate is actually a deflation rate. So there's deflation. So that's where we were. And then we talked about the utility per person. So what we can do is simply substitute CT and CT plus 1 to know what the utility of one person is that was born in period T. And we find this expression there, which means that the person is actually happier when there is less inflation. Because what that means, it means that I know that when I retire, then what I saved for my retirement still has some purchasing value. So so if there was a very, very high inflation or even infinite, then it means that I would have a beta ln of 0. So I would basically have with this utility function, I would have my minus infinity utility. So I would be very, very sad. So I prefer having low inflation. And then what we can do is substitute inflation to know what growth rate means for my utility. And if I do that, I find that I like having a positive growth rate. So why do I like a positive growth rate? Well, because it reflects the fact that prices go down because there are more people to produce goods. So more people are asking for the money I still have. So it means that over time, for this type of money scheme or speculative asset, then it's always better if prices go down, of course. And then the question is, so we can. I was just before the class, or maybe after the class has officially ended, I was going to talk about this. Oops, let me just do this. That would be easier. Yeah, this problem there, which is sometimes called by people the biggest Ponzi scheme ever. It's the gap. Oh yeah, this is just saying that I was around here. Okay, it's the gap between how much money is promised um, for retirement by to workers that are working and retire, versus how much money is actually coming in every period. And you see that this gap is always positive. So this is the 2015 gap. So it's not too big, but it's still yeah. In the US it's 28, in the UK it's 8, in Japan it's 11. And then you see that in 2050, that's on current trend more or less where we're going. So it's going to be awful. Yeah, in China, India, the UK, the US, and in total too, it's going to be very bad. Um, so do I have a comment on that? Do people have an opinion? See what's going on? Why is that the case? So again, retirement, as I was saying, is a sort of Ponzi scheme or a sort of asset that we transfer from generation to the other. And so we can ask ourselves, what is the money that's being promised to people who are working? So how generous are their retirement account? How long are they expected to live after they retire? So how much money do we have to give them? And then we contrast this to how much do we hope to gain from to be paid from current workers in each period. And in each period it should be uh, balanced, but we see that this is not the case. It's yeah, there is a larger and larger gap. And you may have heard before the current events of the epidemics and everything. There was a big debates in the last few years, but it's been going on, let's say, the last 30 years in France about retirement. Uh, am I the only one to have heard about this?
No, it was pushed back to 63, I think it was. No, there's like an
Yeah,
age
so
where you can retire, and then they proposed to push it further back.
yeah, exactly. So what's the problem? So why is this happening?
Well, because if you have less than 2 children per couple, then you'll end up in a situation where the previous generation, which is retired and needs money to survive, will need to get that money somehow, and it'll be made by the working generation now. But as the working generation now is smaller than the retiree generation, we'll have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the case. And it's very difficult because there is many issues are being mixed up often. So in France, there's often the debate between redistribution and uh, retirements. And people say, oh, yeah, the rich should pay more to fill in the gap. And so it's a perfectly good thing to keep in mind, but it's a very good way to make sure that we never agree to anything because there are two things. There's redistribution between rich and poor, which is something that can be done in many ways with taxes and with different things. And then there's this uh, intertemporal problem, which is the how do we finance retirements? And if we don't fix it, then at some point it's going to fix itself because the money is going to run out. And yes, what is the problem? Well, the problem is how much people are required to pitch in the retirements. Say in France, in the public retirement system, was decided long ago when people didn't live long after retirement, and when they had the working population was big compared to the retired population. So how do you fix that? Well, I'm not saying that I have the, the answer, but something is going to happen. So either people are going to have to work longer to finance the system and retire so for a shorter time, or they are going to have to contribute more while they're working, or they're going to have to agree to be poorer when they're old. Or they are going to have to commit some kind of no, I don't want to go there, but they have to live after retirement to have a shorter lifespan. Otherwise, at some point, they collect for too long. So something is going to happen. And of course, what may happen is sometimes if it's a public system like in France, then people who don't, so people who are rich may say, oh yeah, but since it's proportional to how much I earn, that I prefer to have my own private retirement fund and not having a public contribution too high, blah blah blah. So it's very difficult to make progress in this debate, but it's one thing is for sure is as you're saying, it's not well, I didn't even include France in this graph, but as you're saying, it's not something that's special to France. It's something that's normal for every country who has gone through a demographic transition. Actually, I'm kind of surprised that it's not going to be even worse for Japan. It's just 11 compared to China, which is almost the same. So it probably they have not had such a need for a contribution to the system for a long time. So they're already in a bad state. But I would have expected that with like half of the people being retired in Japan, they would be in even more trouble. But doesn't look all that bad. Still, it's quite. Yeah, so that's a big problem. That's and I don't want to pretend I have the solution. All right, questions on this? Okay. Um, so now let's go to the corner solution. So that's we don't have to spend too long on that, but that's something that's tricky to think about. So imagine corner solution is yeah, just to remind you, it's oops, yeah, I still have my drawings from last time. Okay, so corner solution is here, and in that case, then the current generation. So here I said high inflation, but I didn't specify what would be the inflation, right? But we can try to think about it. So if people want to consume here, what does that mean exactly for the value of money? Or for the demand of money?
There is no demand for money.
Yes, there is no demand for money. So it means that the value of money now is zero. It doesn't have any value. So so it means, so imagine that you are in a corner solution now. So what does it mean for the previous generation? So here I didn't introduce the matter of information, and yeah, the so Samuelsen's paper is quite richer than the simple version I'm showing here. But so if we might think, so imagine that there's a corner solution now what does that mean for the previous generation? Apart from the fact that they're now dead because they're not consuming anything, because the current generation is consuming everything they produce. But that what does that mean for the value of money for the last generation?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
So if in time t there is we are at corner solution. Okay, so it means that essentially there is no demand for money. Nobody wants money. People want to just consume everything they have. So what does that mean for the value of money yesterday? Or not yesterday, but the period before.
It had nearly no inflation, because if we had inflation, we would have consumed everything before.
So nearly, or
If we had a lot of inflation, we would have consumed everything before. But I don't know by which metrics we're talking about here.
so so let me rephrase this in the way I would put it is, so right now people consume everything they produce, so they don't want money. So the value of money is zero. So if I anticipate, if I'm in the last generation and I foresee that this is going to be the case, then should I save for retirement? So should I accept to receive money in exchange for goods now in hope that the next generation is going to do the same? No, the next generation is now, and they are at the corner solution. So it means that a corner solution in period t means a corner solution in period t minus 1 and t minus 2 and t minus 3. So it's back in the analogy of the textbook. If the last generation says, oh, I don't want to buy the textbook, then the generation does just before that say, oh, I don't want to buy it anyways. So that's a statement about the price level. It means that we essentially have only two regimes in this model. One regimes with interior solution, in which there is never inflation because, or there is inflation, but it's negative inflation. It has to do with the growth rate of the population. And one other solution, which is corner solution for all time, like for every period, there was always a corner solution because no generation could ever trust that the money would have some value next generation because they know that they are not going to want it. So it means there is never really a high inflation in this model. So that's a corner solution, but it's a strange corner solution. So the way to have inflation, to have positive inflation, would be to have some uncertainty. So maybe tomorrow money is going to have value, maybe not. And then at some point, oops, the money stops having value, and there's infinite inflation for one period, and then that's over. The money, money has lost its value. So here's how we put it. But it's something, it's some solution of the model, but obviously it's not the one that's most practical for us, but it's something that could happen in this model. So yes, for some reason, imagine that the current generation anticipates that the value of the money tomorrow will be zero, low or zero. So in anticipation, they choose also to not buy money today, so they don't save, so they don't demand, and the money today has zero value. So even though the previous generation, if there was one unlucky person who had €1 in their pocket, well, who cares that nobody wants that euro. So we always have that. That everybody starves in old age. There's no exchange, intergenerational exchange in this. So yeah, CT -1 in period t is 0, and CT of t plus 1 is going to be 0 as well. Oh yeah, that's this. So CT of t is omega, people consume everything, and CT of t plus 1 is 0. Again, people don't consume anything. So there can only be deflation if we always have this interior solution, but you cannot like have hyperinflation, instant hyperinflation, because you have perfect foresight. If I foresee that in 1 million years people are not going to want money, then I can see all the history in front of me and anticipate that money is never going to have any value. So that's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the logical implication of having perfect information about the future. Um, yeah, so this is not something that was in the paper per se, so you don't have to take too much time on it. But it's something that I wanted to add just to show you what you would maybe want to do if you wanted to have a possible uh, event in which people lose faith in money. So you could imagine that people think that there is some non-zero possibility that money will lose its value tomorrow. So you can just add some probability pi and 1 plus pi. So yeah, you can read this if you're interested. And essentially, so you can just add this into the. So you have to work with lotteries. So if you have learned lotteries, that's good. Or otherwise, it's uncertainty in the utility. But that's not too difficult to deal with. And then what do we find? We find, so we find that consumption today depends on, depends also on the risk of hyperinflation tomorrow. So that's basically the lesson of that. But again, this is for the people who are interested, just to show you how you can enrich the model to make it more interesting. But now we're going to look at hyperinflation for real and look at the next chapter. It's in case there's no question about this chapter. Okay. Yeah, so I start with this quote.
Sir, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've just looked up on the platform where you put the lesson, and we don't have this part of the chapter. We only have the chapter 4 instead of chapter 5. So.
Are you sure? I
Yeah.
thought I put it like 4 weeks ago. Let me check that. Oh, I didn't. Okay, I, yeah. When I updated the website, I didn't put the right link. Okay, let me do that real quick. So I'll put the link for the handout for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's my bad, sorry. Okay. Hope it's not a YouTube video about Legos, and I'll be fine. Yeah, okay, I think it works now. Okay. Back in business. Yeah. So this is what Keynes says. So there is no. Do you still see this $100 trillion bill?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. So yeah, this is what John Maynard Keynes says. So there is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. Well, I can think of many good means to overturn the basis of the society, but yeah, the currency is one of them. The process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. So yeah, so when he was writing this, yeah, so the world was seeing a lot of problem of hyperinflation, especially in Weimar Republic. Yeah, so now we have seen a simple model in which uh, we can we can understand how money is a speculative asset and how it can be rational to believe that yeah, it's going to keep its value over time. But this is more of an applied lesson about it. So what happens if people lose faith in money? What happens if at some point the people think, oh, maybe the next generation is not going to pay for my retirement with what I anticipate that the value I saved for retirement. And yes, so this is Zimbabwe. So what was very interesting about them is they really kept their faith in the Zimbabwean dollar until the end, until they printed this $100 trillion bill. But still, they had to change their currency at some point. So, but that was a that's the image if you look for hyperinflation. But that's the image you see. But it's not the record. You're going to see what the record is. It's a European country. Okay, so what's the basis for the value of money? So this is a question that's been asked for a very long time. So here's a nice nice person from here, Jean Bodin, professor in law in Toulouse in 1560. Um, so what he was answering to is Malestroit, who saw that, oh, it's weird how the value of precious metal was being eroded over time, and he didn't understand why that was the case, especially silver. And then, so what he realized is, oh well, it's no mystery. It's just that there was a lot of colonies that were bringing back precious metal back then, and especially silver from Potosi, South American mine. So Spain was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get super rich because now I have metal." But then what happens? Okay, well there is so much silver, and not that many people actually want it anymore because there's too much around. So the price of silver goes down, and he was obviously not one of the first person to realize the link between the value of a good and how rare it is. But yeah, so he realized that in the context of money, especially. So now we're going to see what happens to what happens in the long run. So in the short run, many things can happen, can influence inflation and the interest rates. That has especially to do with output gaps and stuff like that. But what is interesting is, yes, but what about the long run? So in the long run, so this is, for instance, what this phenomenon was about. So he was looking at this thing happening year after year after year, and then he realized, okay, it's because the supply is slowly but steadily increasing. So these two economists, McCandless and Weber, wrote a very nice review, some monetary fact, and they said, well, what we're going to look is at the link between uh, the real output, the money supply, and prices, and we're going to see what changes over time, what drives prices. Do prices follow real output, or do they follow the money supply? And if this phenomenon is the most important, then what we should observe is that prices tend to follow the money supply more than they tend to follow real output. But if countries are more or less responsible and they print money as they need it to exchange the amount of good that they have, then we should look and see that the money supply follows real GDP, and prices are more or less maintained. So we're going to look at what happens. So they look at a sample of 110 countries over 30 years, and they take the long run geometric average rate of growth for the standard measure of production. So it's gross domestic product adjusted for inflation, so real GDP. So if you want to see how we do that, you go back to lesson 2, I think, when I talked about this. How you look at the GDP and you take into account inflation. And then 3 commonly used definitions of money, so M0, M1, and M2. So so this you may have seen that in your previous years. So M0 is paper money. M1 includes deposit accounts and more illiquid assets. And then, but still, if it's your banking account, usually you can just withdraw money very easily from it. And M2 includes saving accounts. I think it includes a traveler's check. This is going to be very important in the exam. I'm going to ask you, does M2 include traveler's check or not? No, I'm kidding. I don't care. And I don't remember. So just to know, it's M higher means a more illiquid asset, and M0 is paper money. And then a standard measure of the general price level is the consumer prices. Oh, by the way, so geometric average. So the arithmetic average is, say, x1 plus x2 plus x3 divided by 3. So geometric average would be x1 times x2 times x3, and we take the cube root of that. So that's so it's because monetary is inherently multiplicative, as you're going to see. So that's the proper way to take the average over time. Yeah, and then they look at several subgroups. So they also look at two homogeneous subgroups, the OECD countries and the Latin American countries. And what do they find? Well, they find that yes, money supply is very important. So this is on the x-axis money growth and on the y-axis inflation. And it pretty much looks like there is a one-to-one correspondence between the two, this 45-degree line. So if you increase by, say here, by 40% consumer prices over a certain period, then the money supply over a certain period, then you increase by 40% the price level. So that's there's a really a one-to-one correspondence between the two. So the phenomenon that was noted by Jean Bodin in Europe is still going on strongly. Prices are in the long run dictated by the money supply. That's an undeniable fact. And this is just this is for the whole sample, I think. Yeah, but it works for the two subsamples as well. And what is extremely relevant too is that for normal quote unquote level of inflation. So if there's very low, if I just looked at normal countries that didn't suffer from very high inflation, then it wouldn't maybe be as clear. You would think there is some noise in the correlation, but what drives this relation is really the outliers basically. So if some country has huge inflation, then it means that they are going to have a huge increase in money supply, then they are going to have a huge inflation. A question about this? Oh, okay. And then what is the relation to real output growth? It's zero. So in the long run, there doesn't look to be any relation between output growth and inflation. So again, in the short run, things will change, but for long stretches of time, so yeah, here's 1960 to 1990. So what really matters is the increase in money supply and not the increase in GDP. Or to put it another way, maybe there's some short-term relation between the two, but in the long run, the GDP just doesn't seem to be all that important.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But if you print out money that that through a mechanism makes your exports relatively more attractive to other people because you need to buy your products with your national money currency. So what China's been accused of doing is printing out money, making their own products more relatively cheaper than other countries. So pulling in more investors and playing the game kind of unfair. So I mean, their GDP has grown.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. So that's a fair point. It's just not something that you observe long term. So you might have. So here so first of all, real output growth, you see it doesn't vary very much. So I don't know what country this was. I don't want to say, maybe it's in this over that period, which country has that level of real output growth. I don't know, Japan or. Yeah, I don't want to look ridiculous, so yeah, I don't want to say I know which dot it is, but it's just that it doesn't vary that much. But yeah, so maybe you can go from here to here, but it's not going to matter all that much compared to the outliers that print an incredible amount of money over a short period, as we're going to see, and which essentially is all absorbed in the price levels. But you're absolutely right. There many mechanisms can make us think that there should be. So let me say another story. So imagine that we just decide to fuse together France and Germany. So imagine that they're more or less identical in terms of money supply and GDP. So well, GDP doubles and money supply doubles. So we should see a straight line, right? It should be a one-to-one relation. So why doesn't that happen? Well, it just looks like over these long stretches of time, growth doesn't vary all that much between countries, but and yet money supply can vary very much. Yeah, that's a short, that's a long answer to this interesting question. Um, yeah, so okay, yeah, I'll go on with that. And then yeah, well, actually, that's sort of your question. So, could printing money favor growth? Well, it kind of looks like it may in this subsample of OECD countries, but it's not a lot of points. If you remove that point and or that point, so it's not super strong. It might be there. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say that my theory is perfectly verified just by looking at a small graph with that many points. I don't know what the R squared is for this. Might be like point 0.3 or something. So it's not that high. I don't. By the way, there is a website you can go just to check whether you know your statistics well. So they just show dots, and you have to kind of guess what the R squared is. So if to get to practice your visual skills and your econometrics, go on that website, and if all the dots are super close to the line, so then the R squared is very high, like 0.9. But if they are scattered all over the place, then the R squared is small. All right. And yeah, so this is for the whole sample, I think. Yeah, so yeah, this is the link between inflation and real output growth. So again, no link. So it looks like yeah, money and price levels are doing their thing, and the two and they don't have such a big impact on the real output. So and in a way, it's reassuring because as we have already said in micro, money should sort of be neutral. Even if the price levels are 10 times higher, then it would mean that nominally I would have income 10 times higher, but expenses 10 times higher, and it wouldn't affect all that much how much I spend. So if yeah, so it kind of shows that in the long run, this makes sense. That money is just some means of exchange, but it's the number that's written on the paper money doesn't really matter. Okay, so now let's introduce something that you may have seen in the past. Does this ring a bell to you, the equation of exchange? Could somebody say yes or no, or maybe? Okay, so it doesn't help me. Well, I'll explain it a bit. So we actually we used to have a equation of exchange in the last model. If you remember, we had MT was equal to PT omega beta over 1 minus beta. So that was our equation of exchange for the last model. All we didn't have is the velocity of money, which I'll talk a bit about. But yeah, so this is the relation between the money supply, the price level, and output. And what this says is what is the nominal output, so the nominal amount of money I need to make my exchanges. So it's the real output Y, so amount of stuff I have in the economy, the amount of objects and services, multiplied by the price level of these goods and services. So this determines how much money I need, but this is mediated by how fast money is circulating. So, for instance, if people want to stash a lot of paper money in their mattress, then it means that, so if they want to just exchange their daily exchanges with 10% of the amount of money they have and they keep the rest at home, then it means that this V is very low in a sense. It means that you have to print lots of money so that people have enough of it to exchange daily. So V here is not something that's measurable in the same sense as M, P, and Y here. It's just some term that we add to make this old equation balance. So that's why we see it's an equation of exchange. It's not really a theory of anything. It's just a description, a definition of what we observe. And then, yeah, so M is the money supply, Y is real output, as I said, P is price level, and V is velocity of money. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And then, as I was saying, so this is multiplicative. So money is always going to be multiplicative. So then, when we study that, because we want to study it over time, we want to look at growth rate. Then an easy way of doing this is these two easy steps. So first of all, you take logs of the equation. So log on the left-hand side means log of money plus log of velocity equals, and then logs on the right-hand side, log of price plus log of output. And then if you remember the differentiation of the log of variables, so d ln of x, which would be a function of time, dt would be 1 over x times dx dt. And then we would write just this x dot over x. So if you thought that you were out of growth rate because you were out of the solo model, then no, it's everywhere. So you still have to remember these small tricks that we use. And then we can just use this thing to substitute ln m, ln v, ln p, ln y, and look at their changes over time. So then it gives us this. So money growth plus velocity growth equals inflation, which is inflation, the change in price divided by the price level, plus real output growth, so the change in output divided by real output. And here we put dot, but of course, when we deal with real statistics, then it's not a real time, it's not a continuous time model. It would be a discrete time model. So we would look at deltas, for instance, but the same thing would hold on. All right, so just a trick question. So, or not a trick question, but an interesting question. So, what was a very good invention in recent years that increased V? I'm just going to get water and think about it. By recent year, I mean maybe over the last 50 years.
The credit cards, maybe?
Triste, très triste.
of course, lots of good answers. There's one I'm thinking about. Any idea?
The credit cards and wireless.
Yes, perfect. Very good. Yeah, I was thinking about the ATM too. So yeah, to just be able to withdraw money in the street without entering the bank and talking to anybody. So that's being extremely useful to increase velocity. Okay. Yeah. So what does McCandless and Weber's results suggest? Again, well, it suggests that there is a one-to-one relationship over time or relation over time between the growth of the money supply and the price level. But there might be some small relation between the growth of output and the growth of the money or the growth of price, but it's just it's too faint over the long run compared to these. So because this output growth doesn't change all that much from country to country. So you don't see a country that had a growth rate of 200% and the other had a growth rate of 2%. So it's but you can see that for M and for P. That's the thing that we have to remember. And so the paroxysmal episodes of that is what we're going to talk now about hyperinflation. So we started at yeah, so we have like 20 minutes left. All right, so that's good. So this class I want to get to the Kagan model or very close, and then last class we see Kagan model. And then the last class of the semester is question and answers. And then over the top of that, I'm going to add another question and answer session. Sorry. Yeah, so that's the program for the end. Okay, so hyperinflation episodes. So we see episodes of the past and the present and maybe the future, but although it's difficult to predict the future. So one notable example was France. So this is just after the revolution, so 1795, 1796. Of course, in period of political turmoil, then it's not that good for because for monetary stability, because you need if you don't know who has the monopoly of power and to emit money, then everything can happen. So what the National Assembly did back then was to issue bonds that were backed by church property that was seized during the revolution. So we said, oh, okay, we just take everything that we find in churches that's made of gold and stuff, and then we emit our assigna, they call it assigna, to finance the revolution. The problem is that it wasn't all that difficult to imitate, and those tricky English people they found a very easy way to counterfeit them. So at some point, the asignas began losing a lot of their value when people realized that there was a lot of asignas going around. So the peak inflation month. So notice that usually in inflation we talk about years, but in hyperinflation we're going to talk about months because things are going very quickly. So yeah, the peak month of hyperinflation was 304% during this episode. One was the Weimar Republic that most of you know about, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk about it later. That's why I'm not commenting on it right now. China, 1937, 1949. Again, that's a period of economic turmoil in which there was nationalistic forces that were fighting with communistic government, and they were injecting a large amount of paper currency in the economy. So the economy, the currency lost its value. And now the champion, Hungary. So that's just post-war. So what happened? Well, they still had the money going around, the pre-war money. So that's for 1945, 1946. So they were just coming out of the Second World War. But the problem is the most of the country was destroyed. So then what would you do? Well, so if World War II destroyed 90% of the manufacturing capacity, then it means that there is essentially 10% of the transaction that you would have had before. So to have stable prices, imagine that velocity doesn't change. So how much should you change the money supply? Well, you should essentially take back 90% of all the paper money that's in circulation because it's not needed. But of course, you can't do that. Once you distribute it, it's very hard to take it back. People have it, and then what happens is, well, prices adjust. So because prices, as we have said, it's something that's psychological. It all you need is one or two people to say, "Oh, I think maybe the money is not all that good." So then, okay, then there's a panic, and people can start not having faith in money. So what was and then worse is they said, oh, let's so we want to so the industrial capacity of our country has been destroyed. What should we do? Well, we should prime up the pump by injecting even more money in the circulation to make people want to feel rich and want to work. So did that work? Well, no. There was already like 10 times too much money in circulation. So if you inject even more by having low interest rate and banks lending even more money, so yeah, it's a very bad cocktail for monetary stability. And yeah, the peak month was. So you see that. So sometimes we talk about astronomical numbers. Well, you don't even have. So you have like several trillion galaxies, for instance, but this is even bigger than this. Like the peak month was 1.3 times 10 to the 16% per month. So what does that mean? So basically so I think during yeah, so exactly. So the prices would double every 15 hours. So imagine that. Imagine your landlord says, "Oh, please pay me your rent." "Oh yeah, yeah, I pay you next week." Well, then you have to pay. Then your rent has been it's zero almost. So you see how you can't do anything after that. It's over. People just think about money all the time. That's the only thing that's going on. Of course, there's no point in collecting taxes anymore because you start collecting, and then when you're done, the money you've collected has no value. And in 1946, so $1 was worth 4.6 octillion pengos, the national currency. So I think octillion in English is different from octillion in French. So, but yeah, who cares? It's a huge number, and so nobody wants pengos anymore. So yeah, that they are the champion. It's never been. Even Zimbabwe didn't have such a huge inflation episode. Yeah, and then others. So Latin America, they had a bunch. Bolivia, so that was 84, 85. Brazil, I'm going to talk about Brazil a bit later, 85 to 94. Yugoslavia, there was the war and genocide and the NATO blockade. So again, the government needed money to finance the war. And so the peak inflation was 314 million%. So that's a big, still a big thing. Yeah, and by the way, maybe you have realized last class that I changed my background. I had another picture in the back. Now I decided to bring that one. So let me show you my picture. I don't know if you can see it well or not. So because I visited the country, and I bought, yeah, so somebody was for €5 was selling all these bills. So you can see what this looks like. So it starts with 5,000 and then 10,000, 50,000, 500,000. And then, yeah, the biggest is 500 trillion, I think. Yeah. So that's what that's what hyperinflation is. I don't know if you see it. Yeah. So 500 trillion is the worst. So yeah, don't worry, it's not worth anything right now. The frame was much more expensive than the bills. Okay, so now let's talk about the Weimar Republic. So yeah, more or less, you know the story, I think. So yeah, when World War I breaks, then Germany suspends convertibility of its currency into gold. So they needed money to finance. So they said, no, you cannot ask for gold anymore. We need all the gold we want, and we are going to print as much money as we need. Oh, by the way, so this lack of convertibility between currency and precious metal, it didn't start in France, or it didn't even start there. I think one episode is, yeah, it started so it's happened many times, as we'll see later. So every time that at some point a government needs money, then they say, oh, we suspend convertibility of our currency. So yeah, instead of financing the war with income tax, as France did, then they just borrowed. And after World War I, then the Versailles Treaty forced Germany to pay a very large reparation, so 132 billion gold marks. And that was not a good idea. So in the end, only 20 billion were paid back from 1920 to 1931. But Germany's plan wasn't all that bad. So what they thought is, we're going to win the war, and then we're going to pillage France and our neighbors, and then we have so much money that it's easy to pay back our lenders. So that was a good plan. It's just, yeah, they didn't win, and now they were stuck without the spoils of war and a very, very big debt to pay back. So yeah, one of the most famous economists of the 20th century, John Maynard Keynes, was there when they discussed how much Germany should pay back, should pay as reparation for the war. And he said that was a very bad idea. And this is interesting because it's an economist, so he should talk about things like production and money. But he really had already the idea that there's that a lot of things has so economy is really linked with the society as at large, and with attitudes. And so he says things like, it's going to traumatize innocent German people that didn't choose to go to war, it's going to damage the nation's ability to pay, and it's going to limit the country's ability to buy exports from other countries, hurt Germany and wider world. So yeah, he didn't think that maybe it would link to the bloodbath of World War II, but yeah, already he said that what they were asking was a very bad idea, and he decided to resign from the peace conference. Yeah, so then what they did was, okay, well, we don't, Germany isn't rich enough to pay back its debt. So what we're going to do is print, well, we have to pay back in foreign bills. So yeah, so domestically, what we're going to do is print banknotes, so we're able to pay back the reparation. So then, yeah, it didn't work all that well. So yeah, in 1923, the French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr to ensure the reparations are paid, but that doesn't work because it's the industrial zones of Germany. So Germany is even. So you just see if you go back to Solo, what they did is, oh, let's pay ourselves in K instead of waiting for production to be instead of waiting for Germany's production. Why? We're just going to seize Germany's capital K. But then, of course, if you reduce K, then the production is even lower. So yeah, there was just no chance that Germany could pay back. Workers in Ruhr go in a general strike. The German government prints more money to try to continue to pay them, to resist passively the invasion of France and Belgian troops. And the excess of paper mark printing causes hyperinflation. So by November 1923, the American dollar was worth, I don't know what's that number. So this is million, trillion, yeah, so quadrillion or something. So a lot of, so yeah, the German marks were not worth a lot, let's just see. So this is the hyperinflation. So that's why we measure that in months, as you can see, because when it starts, it gets out of hand very quickly, because usually there's the government that's behind it. The government needs money. The money is losing its value, but the government, joint with the central bank back then, could more or less control the money supply. So they say, well, we need a bigger denomination. So it goes from 1,000 to 500 million or trillion very quickly. So this is what it looks like, the value of one gold mark and paper mark. So yeah, what's nice about one gold mark, it's in gold, so it's linked to the value of gold, whereas paper mark was floating back then. It was not linked to anything. So that's what happened. So here's the traditional illustration. So yeah, this was 100 trillion marks, 10 to the 14th. Yeah, and then children playing with. So what's the diagnostic here? What went wrong? Oh, well, we're out of time almost. Is there some answer as to what went wrong? In a broad sense, or in all the hyperinflation episode, what goes bad?
Money has no value.
Yes, but who decides that?
It's a conversion between this money and others' money or other goods.
Yes, but who decides? So can I just decide that? So, for instance, I'm going back to Canada. Can I just decide that from now on, the euro is €1 is worth 10 Canadian bills, so I'm rich when I come back, or not? So we're onto something. We almost have it.
It's the different national banks.
Yes. So, okay. Well, I'm going to tell you what I was after. So what I was after is so that money was always or almost always linked to something else. So we kind of see that there is barter and then money and then other thing, but we almost never observe a society in which there is barter. Because as soon as you start, barter is a truck. So as soon as you start saying, "Oh, I'm going to exchange a fish for schooling of my kids," then you say, "Yeah, but maybe I don't want your fish today, and it's going to be rotten in 2 days, and maybe I don't trust that my kids are going to be educated after a certain amount of time." So you see that very quickly, people go to something that has some characteristics, which is it has some real economic value. It is easy to transport. It is and it has value for a very large number of people. So you know that you have many people you can go and see and that are going to agree to accept it. So very quickly you don't exchange in fish or in schooling or anything. You exchange in
I have an
precious. What?
Could I try an answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
After World War II, cigarettes were big. People were even paid in cigarettes. American expats were paid in food rations as well, in food ration tickets. So there's no spoiling factor in food ration tickets and cigarettes.
Perfect. So that's so yeah. My point was exactly. My point was, money works. So paper money works as long as people trust that it's anchored to something that has real value. As long as they say, "Oh, it represents something that I know has value and I can obtain it in exchange for it, so I'm ready to accept it." Once people think, "Oh, maybe it's not the case anymore," then okay, I'm never going to accept that. I don't want it. Even if you give me this much of these bills, I don't care. It has zero value for me. But things like cigarettes, rations, or things that are exactly as you said, cigarettes, I know that any smoker is going to accept them, or ration is food, and it's not going to spoil. I can keep it for a while and exchange it after. So very quickly it becomes, so it's not that it's barter because I'm not the one producing the cigarettes. So in barter economy, you would exchange, I would be the cigarette producer and I would exchange it for other thing. Now it's just that, okay, we need something that we know have value and everybody accepts, so we use that instead. So it's very perfect answer. And what went wrong was exactly at the point when the government says, "Oh, we just stop having the convertibility between the two." Okay, so now we're over time, so we're going to finish this the next class and go on with the Kagan model. And almost, yeah, promised yeah, I should be done by the correction. I'm waiting for one of my TD graders to answer me. And yeah. Okay, so have a nice weekend, everybody.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.